Great. Well, look, fantastic to be here today, and thank you so much for making time. I think there's so much lack of transparency around two big things in the world right now: venture capital and AI. And so I thought it'd be great to kick off working together with a bit of an exploration of how Balderson ended up investing in deepset, which we're very happy to be doing, and a little bit about the company and what you do here. So I guess let's start off with the obvious question: like, how did you get deepset started?
Yeah, well, this was basically, I think right now, 5 years ago, when we came together, Milos, me, and Timo, with this big belief, and to us it really felt obvious back then, that language will be the dominant interface to products, to everything, to computers, that you will just use language to interact with them. And Timo and me back then worked in a company where we used NLP at production, at scale. We know how hard that was actually to get latest technology into such a working state. And I knew Milos back from university days. We always thought about starting a company, and that just then felt like the right moment to go out and explore what does it actually take to bring LLMs, they weren't called LLMs back then, but NLP, to enterprises. And yeah, we were kind of bootstrapped then first years, the company.
So obviously starting off being bootstrapped, I mean, they're really hard yards, right? But this was a market 3 or 4 years ago, which no one had really heard of. What was the things that you saw and sort of what were the things you learned that meant that you were ready to say, right, there's a really big company to be built here?
So first of all, while we were bootstrapped, we really exposed ourselves to enterprises and we really solved problems with LLMs early on. So this was a great learning journey, and the more you build, the more you learn, the more you somehow also understand how can this become part of a repeatable offering and ultimately a scalable product. So this journey was absolutely essential. In parallel to this, actually the technology also made a big jump, right? So when we talk today about GPT, we talk about generative pre-trained transformers, and the first transformer was already born end of 2019. So the company was 6 months old. Google released the BERT model back then, the first of its kind transformer. And we understood actually, hey, this is a big moment for natural language processing. And actually this is the foundation for this vision that we're having. And taking this technological tailwind, somehow thinking about how to productize it given the first-hand experience we have. And then ultimately also, starting to build a product with Haystack, our open source framework that we then released properly back then in 2020. And then, we simply saw great adoption. We somehow saw many people saying, hey, this solves really a meaningful problem for us. We want to use this into production. There was a lot of confirmation around us. There was a lot of confirmation also, inside the team. We felt, hey, this is really what we were looking for. And then in 2021, we really felt like, okay, now we should double down on this and, really invest in growing this very quickly and capturing this window of opportunity.
And today, deepset's best known for Haystack and the tooling and community you've built around that, used by tens, if not hundreds of thousands of developers across the world and many well-known organizations. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about what does Haystack do and why have so many people adopted it?
So Haystack is an open source Python framework. So it helps developers to compose their LLM applications out of different underlying technologies. So think of it as a kind of Lego toolbox where you can pick your model provider, you can pick OpenAI, you can pick a privately hosted open source model. It's very easy to change. You can do the same for vector databases. You can do the same for file converters. So all these kind of pieces you can easily orchestrate, bring together to really have them solve your use case at the business. And I think that's a bit special. I think also about our DNA. We never built that framework in a bubble. Like we always were close to real use cases in the enterprise. So a lot of stuff that we have in Haystack actually solves problems, sometimes also very boring, annoying problems that enterprise customers have.
And now with this new funding round that you're releasing and an expansion of the business, you're looking at more enterprise use cases and of course deepset cloud. So how does Haystack and the open source solution you've built play with the enterprise offering through deepset?
So you can think of Haystack really as the technological foundation, like this toolbox. Deepset cloud, in contrast, is a whole platform. So it has also this technological piece in there to orchestrate your application, but it has also all the tooling around the whole life cycle of starting with a prototype, showing that to your end users, collecting feedback. Is that LLM maybe hallucinating, detecting that early on, reducing it so everything you need to then really go to production, have it scaled automatically. Once it's in production, monitor it. So really this whole life cycle that we, over the last 5 years, went through with many enterprise customers, and we try to distill all these learnings into the platform so that more teams out there can actually do that.
And you're one of the very unique teams who have been around for 5 years. It doesn't sound like long, but in this world it really is. When you think about some of the production use cases you've seen already, what are some examples of how people are already using things like LLMs in production today?
One big use case is everything that improves the accessibility to information for people, right? So, enabling people to ask questions and get answers out of large knowledge bases or large content bases. That's quite exciting in media, for example, where we see big newspapers actually adopting our products to improve the user experience for their end users in the way they are consuming their content, for example. That also ranges from, of course, media and newspapers, but also to very professional content providers, for example, in the legal space, where we have customers who are improving, simply the user experience and the information accessibility for lawyers to do their job, to find all legal information they need for a certain case, to really have a comprehensive overview, to really, dig into this vast majority of laws and legal documentation and really find what they need that would really helps them to ultimately solve the problem or their case.
And a lot of the noise in the space today, a lot of the sort of hype around LLMs in particular, is quite scary. People are like, oh, these models are going to take over the world. As we're all going to be getting one step closer to the Terminator every time a new release is made. What are the limitations of these models in reality? Do you think that people are getting a bit carried away with some of the second order outcomes here?
So right now it's all about making the life of humans better, and we also are strong believers that this is also the future of this technology, right? It's about making our lives easier. We are, as humans, we spend tons of time, condensing information, looking for information, also, doing very cumbersome things like, let's schedule a meeting for, let's say, the three of us and find a free slot in a nice spot. This is a lot of administration to get to the outcome, which is, hey, let's meet and let's have our exchange and our conversation. And all of these cumbersome procedures, this is something that LLMs can take away and will take away, and they were not going to replace us. So it's not going to be a joy to have a conversation with an LLM. This is where you still want to have human interaction. This is why we don't really see this risk of LLMs really replacing us, and we don't really see this gloomy future. We really see that this can make our lives so much easier and take away so much of the things that are actually also eating human capacity, and leave more space for creativity and exchange and really those things where humans are somehow really special.
I really like the term like co-pilot assistant here. I think it's picturing very well that it serves the human, but you're still in control. You still do the decisions, so you have to make sure that your co-pilot assistant works well. And I think that's probably where we have to separate the noise from what's really working. And I think this will be also a big wave for the next year where we see, okay, what really moves the production. I think there's a bunch of use cases, things that we can now serve. The technology really made a kind of a step function forward. But there's also honestly still a lot of things that only work in a demo stage. And I think it's a bit like our role as well to help customers find that out, to separate a bit. Okay, what is really giving value and what might take, I don't know, an additional year to really make it reliable for production.
Just to add on this, probably the biggest value in the next 12 to 18 months is coming from very pragmatic use cases and maybe from very pragmatic and maybe even, it might sound often like an unexciting problem, right? But still that's where, you can have a lot of value generated, right? So again, simply thinking about a lawyer who's looking for all documents that are somehow related to this very specific problem they're working on, that's already hours of work, it's a lot of mental capacity that is usually, that usually has to be invested for this task. And it has a big effect, even though it doesn't look like a shiny demo, that is, I don't know, like, hey, I give a command and I get my own video game or I get my own movie. It's really something very pragmatic, yet super valuable. And this is what we think, what we will see in the next few months and probably in the next few years being really adopted and finding its way to the mainstream first.
Yeah, and it's an amazing experience. Obviously we've known you for a while, but seeing you build the platform and grow, because we see so many pitches from companies who say, look, we're building the next generation of robotics, and we're already there, right? And we're building the next generation of AI, which is going to completely take over your life. It's going to be your boyfriend and your girlfriend. It's going to be your butler, and it's going to drive you to work, right? And we see all these pitches, but actually that was never your pitch. Your pitch was, we're the next generation of productivity, right? And just as great SaaS tools and even great mobile apps, just put the button in the right place so your thumb could get there quicker, or put the information in the slot at the right time to enable you to do your job better and be more creative with it. I think you're taking that system of intelligence basically to the next level. But indeed, sometimes the things you work on perhaps aren't the sexiest of things, but I think that's a good thing. So look, obviously we've known you for a while, but we started discussions quite early this year talking about a funding round. How did you make the decision that you were in the right space and that you wanted to reach out and start talking to venture capitalists again?
I mean, everyone's probably well aware, right, that the new year started with a lot of awareness around the space, and especially LLMs and generative AI was suddenly a topic that was around everywhere, and it was everywhere in mainstream media. If you were talking to your grandparents, even they probably heard of tools and demos out there, or maybe they even used them. So this general awareness created also a lot of demand for our products, actually. So we really saw, hey, this is a new level of demand that we're seeing, right, on the open source side, with deepset cloud on the commercial side. And there was suddenly a very true interest to adopt these technologies. It wasn't about, hey, we're just exploring, or hey, we're just looking into it. It suddenly felt like, hey, look, it's around everywhere. We experience these capabilities. It works. We have to make a move now. This might be maybe even something like, I don't know, the new internet for us, or it can be at least as disruptive as the internet for us. So we have to do something. And this showed us, hey, probably this technology is really, about to cross the chasm. And this was somehow what we were waiting for, right, since 5 years. And it was quite clear that when we saw all of that demand and all of that also value that we could bring to these people, that we had to double down on it. And this is where we really felt, okay, we have to simply add some more capital to the company and really be able to capture the upside that is now really there for us.
And look, given the sector you're in, given both of your backgrounds, right, you were very well known, and given just the scale Haystack had got to, I'm sure there was no shortage of inbound interest from venture capitalists. How did you two think about the kind of partner you wanted to work with, and how do you just navigate that level of interest from potential VC investors?
So it's always about, probably many people say this, but it really is about this. It's about finding a partner, and finding someone who can complement you as a founding team on the right things. Now, with all respect, I know that you know a lot about AI and machine learning, but that's not necessarily what was the reason for us for us having decided to work with you. It's more about where does this partner complement us. And with Balderton, we had a very good feeling that there's a lot of stability, a lot of help with regards to, hey, this is now what matters in this market. This is going crazy. We can help you to prioritize. We can help you to tell you and guide you through this, and also help you a little bit to distinguish between what is now noise and what is actually really what we should focus on, and where is actually the substance in what we're doing, and what should we double down on. And this is very important. This is something that, of course, venture capital firms can provide because they've seen companies, they went through many technology cycles, and this is of course very important to us, that we have the feeling that, hey, this is a partner who brings this kind of so let's say experience to the table and helps us with these priorities. So this is super essential. This was really like a feeling that we had, and this was why it was clear for us that we want to work with you.
Great. And when you think now you raised this new round, you have an incredible pipeline of people and an amazing user set already. What are the challenges that lie ahead when you think about the 2 or 3 things that really matter to you and the rest of the team? What are the things now keeping you up at night?
Plenty things that keep you up at night.
You have a young child as well, so
exactly. So number one, growing an organization is we realize that it's always a challenge, because you want to maintain all of that alignment that you were having while you were a smaller company. You want to make sure that everyone knows, okay, that's our vision, that's our mission, but look, this is what we're working on right now. This is why it's important, right? So that's not so easy, to be honest. And as things grow, and you add more people, and maybe you don't have such a direct connection to everyone anymore, you really have to think about very good systems to ensure this, because that's where a lot of your results are coming from, right? From very strong alignment, and from really a lot of pace in what you do, and a lot of pace in the right direction. So this is definitely one challenge.
Just on that point, by the way, one of the things we did in our due diligence, and I always do this, is when you talk to people, not just the founders, but I spoke to the head of solutions and your co-founder, head of DevRel, and head of product, and I asked them all the same question, which is what are your priorities? And what's great to hear, and what really gave us reassurance, is to a person, they all were pretty aligned. But obviously that's easier to do when you're 40 to 50 people rather than 400 people, as you may be one day.
Another challenge is definitely, for us, it's now also not just about expansion with regards to, the number of people, but also geographical expansion. This market is a global market, right? And we understand and we see ourselves as a global company. And this means also, for example, that the US market is not something where we actually want also to increase our exposure and be on the ground. And suddenly you really, you become a growing company on 2 continents and 2 time zones. So that's also definitely one challenge that we're seeing. And then, of course, we went through this cycle, right, from the first transformer to what we have today with ChatGPT and GPT-4. But the pace is not slowing down, right? So we see that this technology is probably even accelerating more and more and more, right? Month over month over month. So we really have to make sure we can stay also on top of things. Again, it's a lot about having a system in place that helps you do this, and somehow being very systematic about how we always can keep up with the latest innovations, how we also incorporate them then ultimately to our products, right? To not become irrelevant, right? Because this is always a risk, and this is something we are well aware of, because we saw this somehow happening also in this space, right? I mean, we're around since 5 years, and then you see some players who maybe didn't follow also, the latest evolutions, and there's a text to it. So this is really something where we care a lot about and think about, hey, how can we make everyone in the company somehow accountable for this, and also systematically stay on top of things.
In 30 fill maybe on the product side also the missing gaps that are still out there in the ecosystem, right? So we talked about going from that hype to real production use cases. I still feel there are like a lot of things missing. We are innovating then ourselves. So a lot on how do you detect hallucination? How can you really reduce that, measure that? And this is still, I think, from what we hear from customers, a big requirement to really move it out and give it put it in the front of your customers. So really having trust in that. So also, of course, for that we I think need to push and be on top of things, thought leaders in that space, to make sure people can bring this to production.
And talking about thought leadership, we think about 5 years' time. We mentioned LLMs. There's obviously a few sort of $10 billion, maybe $100 billion models out there today in terms of their value, with what Microsoft's achieved, what OpenAI have achieved, what Google have achieved already. Do you think that in 5 years' time we'll still be talking about a handful of large models which will really dominate the use cases? Or do you believe that this proliferation of open source models, we're also seeing much smaller number of parameters, significant improvements in terms of efficiency and time to train, that actually it might be the open source models that win in the long run?
We're big believers in open source. Of course, our product is open source at the core. The value in open source is that it adds a lot of trust into technology, right? And especially when you think about something like machine learning, it's quite hard for people to really fully trust the system if they cannot at least have the option to look into it, or to understand, for example, what has this model been trained on. Or maybe to even read a paper and understand a little bit about, okay, what are the flaws of this model? Where does it work well? Where doesn't it work well, right? So this is why we still are strong believers in open source models, and we still see that there's actually a tremendous appetite in using these models in enterprise setups, especially since in enterprises the use cases are often very, very well defined. It's very narrow what you want the model to do, right? So if you can have an open source model that really does this job very well, you are very likely to go for the open source option, of course, because it's transparent. You know what works on the processing side. You know what's happening. We're not really believing that it will be one model, if proprietary or open source, that will rule them all. Different use cases will have different models that will probably perform better or worse. You will have a variety of design options around models, size definitely, but also this idea of somehow having a model and going the last mile with it, right? We believe that in enterprises, also we talked about these unexciting use cases, actually can unfold a lot of value, right? But usually enterprises have very specific requirements. When it comes to software, you will always see that also big vendors like SAP, their products are somehow they look quite individual, right, per customer. And this is pretty much how we also see the future of LLMs and LLM-based systems, right? There's so much value in this. It's worth, going down the last mile. And even if this means that you're changing this full LLM application and adapting it and adding some custom elements, or if you go down the model and you think about, okay, how can I make this model work even better on my individual data, on my use case specific data, then this is a future we believe in. And this means that, maybe or probably enterprises will even have very individual models for individual use cases. So it's going to be probably a space with many options, and not, we are not expecting a convergence into one model.
Yeah. And we first started sort of working on our thesis around, they weren't even called LLMs popularly then, but when the Attention is All You Need paper came out, we started working on it. And I think one of the things we really focused on was which are the founders and the technologists and the businesses which were going to create value, not just demos, because there were a lot of demos, and which are the ones which are going to win if we do see this proliferation of models, this availability of open source as well as proprietary, and this fine-tuning of models to very specific use cases. I think those were the two things we were really focused on. And as a result, we're very happy to be working with you both on that mission as well over the years to come. But once again, thanks so much for spending time on this. I think it's really important that people speak more about both the venture capital process and also getting AI into production, because it's two areas which a lot of people want to know more about. There's not a lot spoken about it. And thanks so much for agreeing to work with us.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, James.
Great.